Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy. Sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. I'm Ed Kless with my friend and co-host Ron Baker, and folks, on today's show, we're going to be talking about Prospera, and we have our interview with Lonis Hamaili. How's it going, Ron?
Great, Ed. I've been looking forward to this. This is going to be really interesting, fascinating topic.
It is a fascinating topic. I look forward to this conversation. Let me read Lonis in so we can get started with the conversation. Lonis Hamaili is the Vice President of Growth at Prospera, a startup city located on the island of Roatán, Honduras. Before joining Prospera, he co-founded D-Work, a decentralized project management tool designed to facilitate community success for decentralized science, decentralized autonomous organizations. He has been involved with other ventures, including Depict.ai, and has participated in Y Combinator's top companies list twice. In mid-2024, he made a significant career shift, leaving Silicon Valley to join Prospera, driven by his interest in innovation, governance models, and economic freedom. Welcome to the Soul of Enterprise, Lonis Hamaili.
Thanks. Thanks for having me, guys.
So you came to my attention in an article that was published on the Foundation for Economic Education back in November. The article is entitled "Why I Left Silicon Valley for a Honduran Startup City." But before we talk about that why, first explain to our audience what the heck is Prospera.
Sure. So Prospera is the world's only kind of startup city with significant legal freedoms. So that means that we don't only kind of own the land and can, use it to build buildings. We actually have significant autonomy in terms of the legal framework. So in Prospera, the zone, basically the criminal law of the host country, in this case Honduras, it still applies within the zone. So you can't kill, you can't steal, you can do any of that, which is very fair. But in terms of all the non-criminal law, which is 99% of law at this point, we have autonomy over that, and we can create our own legal frameworks, which in effect means that you can do a lot of stuff within biotech, financial stuff, energy, industry that you can't do anywhere else.
So how do they decide what portion of criminal law does and doesn't apply? Obviously, murder. I would think that rape would be on the list, but right. Certain things like drug use is that covered? And how do they decide what that line is?
Yes, so this is kind of on a case-by-case basis for the host country. So we negotiate with the host country and try to figure out what is the level of legal autonomy that we're able to get. In this case, the full Honduras criminal law applies in the zone, which include heavy drug use. It includes some of the other things you mentioned, but it's on day to day it doesn't really affect us. I mean, the things here are quite. The criminal code of Honduras is not so expressive that it actually hinders us in any meaningful way on the ground.
How big is Prospera in relationship to, say, a city in the United States? What land use wise, and then also population wise right now?
Yeah, so we have around 1,000 hectares. So we're mainly located on the island of Roatán, as you mentioned. So the island of Roatán, it's as big as the island of Hong Kong, and so. At some point we will be able to grow, but so far we have up to 1,000 acres on the island. We are, just a few years ago, we were less than 20 people here. And now this year we are more than 300 people. So we're growing somewhat exponentially, but from a very low base, of course.
And so what is the perceived advantage of this going to be in the future? Why do we want to do this at all?
Yes. Yeah. As you said, this is the key question. Like, why bother? Why bother? Going out to the island in that part. The big thing is that this is a place where people, a bunch of freedom lovers, really, who kind of have realized that the key enablers of progress is minimal government, strong property rights, a lot of personal freedom, and that's kind of being diminished all over the world. And so at Prospera, we have the world's strongest guarantees for personal freedom and personal property. And that basically leads to, that enables many businesses to exist here that couldn't exist elsewhere. So one example is, for instance, biotech. And so if you're in the US and you want to do medicine or new biotech, you have to pay on the order of $300 million to get your FDA license to be able to offer your medicine or drug. So let's say you're a small startup and you raised $3 million. That's 1% of the cost you have to pay for the license alone to start generate revenue down the line. And so that obviously kills a lot of innovation. Here in Prospera, on the other hand, we have more business-friendly regulations, which enables companies to come here and do, for instance, biotech stuff, which could cost them on the order of $300,000. So that's 1,000x difference in costs to do the safety trial needed to then be able to offer your drug here. So we have those, and so in biotech, the difference is 1,000x. In many other industries, it can, it differs, but we typically see very significant advantages in doing business here in general.
Other than biotech, what other types of businesses and industries are you trying to attract?
Yeah, so in general, we let the market decide. We want to create enabling conditions and then see where is the market pull. So far the market pull has been biotech and also crypto and fintech to a large extent, which is also getting hammered all over the world. So we have a lot of crypto companies here. People pay with Bitcoin here for all sorts of things on the ground, like coffee and going to restaurants. And so I think this place has the kind of the best shot at becoming a circular, crypto economy.
Is that the official currency? Is there an official currency of Prospera?
We're not too big on on dictating the currency choice of
right.
the restaurants, but we do collect taxes in USD and Bitcoin.
So there are taxes. So you do have a taxation authority.
That is our business model, right? So we are a for-profit entity, and so we have a 5% income tax and a 1% business tax and the 2.5% VAT, and that's it. No other taxes. But that is really our business model, right? So we generate revenue and returns for a shareholder to the extent that we generate enough useful economic activity here where we can take a small chunk, and then that's our business model.
And I mean, just so many questions come to mind. How easy is it to get in and out of Prospera? Is it, so do you go through Honduras obviously first? Do you have to have? Is there Prospera doesn't have its own passport yet? I would imagine.
Correct. Yeah. So you go into first via Honduras. Honduras has a very good kind of visiting and immigration setup, so you can come there for 90 days at a time and very regularly. And the immigration process is quite simple. And then to get into the zone, what we actually will be launching in the next few weeks is just absolutely not a passport, but an Apple Wallet card where you can just scan when you go in, and that's kind of, you will have kind of a Prospera card in your phone.
One of the things we uncovered is that Patri Friedman, who's the grandson of Milton Friedman, came down and he had his Tesla key chip embedded into his hand, which he jumped the gun on that because I think 2 weeks ago they released the fact that I have a Tesla, you can now do it on your watch. So that was a little extreme. but I suppose you could do that too. You could have the chip implanted in your hand and get into Prospera as well.
Correct. You could certainly do that. Yeah, we had David Friedman here last week as well.
Was he? Okay, he's been a guest on the show a long time ago. So the pictures of it look beautiful. Almost looks like a resort. And I imagine is that all new construction, or was there stuff on this island previously?
So both. So we have two main districts on the island. So one is the kind of more of a builder district, and one is more of a family and resort district. So I think the images you're seeing is from the resort district, where we bought a resort in the surrounding land. And so there's hotels, villas, golf, 18-hole golf. There's a Bitcoin center there. There's a Montessori school. And so, that's kind of, and so we have done a lot of new buildings there, but the base resort was there when we bought it. But then the other district is where I live, which is 10 minutes away. That's more of a builder district. We built everything from scratch here. So I live in the Duna Tower, we call it. It's I think 13-story building, which is one of the largest in the country. And that was built from scratch. It couldn't be built with the current zoning laws and permitting regulations in Honduras. We had to do it within the zone. And there's also co-working spaces, etc. here that we built from scratch.
Right. And obviously your internet access is pretty good.
Yes, we have Starlink there.
Oh, Starlink is what what you guys use. All right. Has
Yeah.
he has Elon Musk come to visit yet?
We're working on it. Working on it.
He's busy up here right now doing some stuff up here. Well, I mean, it's actually quite fascinating. But what's the governmental structure? I would imagine that there's not is there a Congress, or is there a legislature? How does that work?
Yes. So basically, the model is a public and private partnership model where we have we have kind of a technical secretary on the ground who um, is an independent entity within the Honduran government, if you will. And so he's the highest authority, if you will, in the zone. And he's appointed by a council of 9 people, where Prospera Inc. controls, I think, five members currently, and the 4 others are appointed by the government.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically there's this back and forth, I guess, between this municipal authority, if you will, and Prospera Inc. But there is no direct democracy currently, but we do have very strong protections of liberty here. So one of the big concepts that kind of originated here is this concept of agreement of coexistence, which means that when you come here as a business and/or as a resident, you sign an agreement which kind of specifies your rights. So you have a right to free speech, you have the right to X, Y, and Z, but you also have a right to legal stability, which means that you have a right to not have the taxes change on you. So we can't arbitrarily change the taxes, because we're contractually bound to provide you with legal stability. And we also can't change the regulations of the zone such that it alters the nature of your business. So either as a resident or a business, you have much stronger guarantees than what typical nation states have, where you can move somewhere, you think you move there under a certain pretext, but then there's an election or there's whatever happens, and then the world changes.
Yeah, like, someone coming in and issuing hundreds of executive orders on their first day in office, undoing all of the previous executive orders. And suddenly slipping back. I don't know where that might happen. But anyway, Lonis, this is absolutely fascinating. I'm really enjoying this conversation already, and we look forward to the next 45 minutes with you. But I want to remind our listeners that you can get a hold of Ron or me by sending an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. The website is The Soul of Enterprise, where you can see show notes as well as previews to upcoming shows. Don't forget about our Patreon channel, patreon.com/TSOE, where there you can listen to the show commercial free, as well as get our bonus episodes, which Ron and I record after each of our regular episodes during the week. But right now, a word for our sponsors.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're here with Lonis Hamaili, and he's the Vice President of Growth for Prospera. And Lonis, I'm fascinated by this. I know there were some initial investments in 2017 when Prospera was founded. Is it right? Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, Mark Andreessen, and Patrick Friedman were involved in the founding of the city?
So it's a bit hard to say exactly because there was all these different entities and some people had ownership in the different entities, etc. I wouldn't say all of those were involved from the beginning directly, but might have adjacently been involved in the entities that ended up investing. But yeah, we started in 2017, as you say, but we didn't break ground in Honduras until 2020.
And was Paul Romer the inspiration for this with his TED Talk? And he's been talking about the world's first, charter city. Didn't he say that about Prospera as well? Was he a big inspiration for this movement?
He was certainly one of the early players. I think the main player was actually a Honduran, Octavio Sanchez. Studied at Harvard at some point, but he was an Honduran economist who was really thinking a lot about how to solve poverty in Honduras and similar countries. Obviously, there's problems in the US and the EU, but there's a lot of problems in the emerging markets. And it's very hard to fix them piecemeal, one thing at a time, because there's so many things breaking. So his idea was, what if we, instead of fixing things piecemeal, we try to have one zone where we have fix everything at once from scratch, and we build a full stack solution there. So that was the initial kind of idea behind having these semi-autonomous zones. And then Paul Romer came in as an advisor at some point and helped a bit. But I would say most of it was actually a Honduran project from the ground up to start, with Paul Romer coming in as an advisor at some point.
Okay. And then on top of the residents who live there physically, you also have e-resident status. Can you kind of explain that?
Yes, so you can sign up on eprospera.com and pay $130 to become a resident of Prospera, essentially. And you can choose to be an e-resident if you're not here physically, and if you're here physically, you can choose to have a real residency. And the benefit is essentially becoming part of the community. You get some community benefits, and you're also allowed to then enter the zone for a set number of months per year automatically.
Right, and you could start a corporation there. You could incorporate there. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. When you sign up, you can then create an entity in a few minutes online. And yeah, it's very simple. We try to make it the simplest jurisdiction in the world to create businesses.
And one of the fascinating things is your regulatory environment. Is it true that the companies get to choose from a list of what type, how they want to be regulated, like maybe how other countries do it, or they can come up with their own?
Correct. Yes. So yeah, when you sign up and create an entity, you can choose your regulatory framework. You can choose Sweden, Singapore, Delaware, but you can also choose to have your own regulatory framework to work under. And so the only kind of constraint, quote unquote, that we have is that if you're in a traditionally regulated industry, which is energy, biotech, fintech, stuff like that, then we require you to have business insurance. So that's a third party. So basically insurance as a regulator, where the third party insurer, if they don't want to underwrite a company that might screw up and then is liable under common law to get sued. So they will look carefully at the regulatory framework you propose, and then if they like it and think it looks good, then they will underwrite you, and then you can start offer your product. But there's not this centralized monopoly of one agency kind of being able to shut you down.
Wow, this is every libertarian's dream, to have the market be regulated by private insurance. That's brilliant.
Yes.
Wow. Your personal journey, what motivated you to become a resident? Because you were about to come to the US, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah. So I guess my backstory is, I guess I spent a few weeks in college in Sweden until I realized that in 2019 it was a bit of a scam, I guess. This
You and Bill Gates, yeah.
It was this very theoretical environment where the professor never had started the company or done anything in the real world. They had just written all of these papers that they didn't end up reproducing mostly anyway. So I quickly dropped out and started an AI company, it's AI in e-commerce. And so that company is still going on. It has, I think, around 25 employees or so in Stockholm. And so I'm still a shareholder advisor there. But I guess after bringing in an external CEO to the company, I started reading a lot and thinking a lot about, what are the drivers of prosperity through history? What is it that enables us to have this great existence, the non-subsistence existence, where we have wealth and we have time and we have opportunities? That's not the norm through history, right? The norm through history for Homo sapiens have been to work all day long, having your kids die by the age of 5, and having a really tough circumstance. So more I looked into this, it became very clear that the fundamentals of libertarianism is kind of are true in a kind of quite objective sense in the way they lead to prosperity. And I was very worried about the lack of acknowledgement, I guess, about the importance of freedom and personal, both personal and economic freedom. But I didn't initially see a way to actually action this, because I never believed in reforming existing institutions through politics or stuff like that. It's so fragile, even if you win one election, the next election it will swing back. And so, I ended up just having it as a thought in the back of my mind. But then as I was about to move to San Francisco, as you said, I spent all of this time getting the O1 visa to the US. Then that's when I heard about Prospera. And then actually on my way to San Francisco, I stopped by Roatán because I wanted to visit Prospera. And that's really when I fell in love with it, when I really kind of immersed myself in how the Constitution was written and the legal framework and the vision of it. So yeah, I ended up, having to, give back the visa and move down here instead.
That's awesome. Wow. That's what really struck me about your article in Fee about when you ask, what are the drivers of prosperity? Ed and I are obsessed with, why some countries are wealthy and others aren't. And, we all know that poverty needs no explanation. It's wealth that needs to be explained. You said you did a lot of reading, history, economics. Whose work influenced you the most, would you say? Because we've gone through the same journey and we have a lot of people that have, shaped our worldview. Who shaped yours?
It's a good question. Many of my friends here, they have one person that really inspired them, whether Ayn Rand or Milton Friedman or Rothbard. I guess for me, it was never one person. It was I read it quite widely and thought that they all overlapped a bit, but they all kind of pointed in the same direction. So yeah, I guess, the boring answer, I guess, I mean, Milton Friedman was great, Rothbard was great, Adam Smith was the first one I read. But they all pointed in the same direction, and I kind of got a bit from everyone.
How about Deirdre McCloskey? Have you ever read her?
I haven't actually, no.
Oh, she's got a trilogy on bourgeois virtues, and her explanation for why the Industrial Revolution, which she calls the Great Enrichment, that hockey stick of wealth creation in a very short period of time. She's got a very fascinating theory of why it happened, where and when it did. I think you'd really enjoy her trilogy. She's brilliant. She's at the Cato Institute now.
Okay.
She's also a professor. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to ask you is it true that some residents of Honduras are skeptical about this city and kind of up in arms about it?
It's true that some residents are. It's not true that most are. So yeah, there are some institutions in Honduras that have been, captured by certain political fractions, as is the case in many countries. However, at large, the population is very positive, and the polling results will tell you that people are positive in relation to Prospera and the CEDES, which is the legal framework. Honduras is a very poor country. It has a north of 50% poverty rate. And so, Prospera coming in here and bringing $150 million of investments and so far generating 3,000 jobs, local Honduran jobs. It's a very positive thing in the eyes of the normal man, right? The common man thinks that this is a great thing. And so, but yeah, there are always, political fractions to try to score media points. But, the situation on the ground is quite different. And if you speak to people, they realize that.
And it's really interesting how Prospera adjudicates disputes. Can you explain that process? You do it through arbitration.
Correct.
Is that right?
We do it. Yeah, we adjudicate almost everything through alternative dispute resolution, which is just private private dispute resolution centers. So we have the default one is PAC, which is the Prospera arbitration center. But when you write a contract with anyone, or when you write the agreement of coexistence as an individual here, you can choose what arbitration provider you prefer. So there's a market of arbitration providers.
That's incredible. And are there any social services that are provided to everybody? Like, I hate to say it, but public goods?
Yeah, I mean, so we have an incentive to provide some extent of public good, because our business model is through taxation, right? So if we generate public goods, that makes the zone as a whole more attractive, we can internalize that value to some extent. I mean, we build roads. We have some visitor centers, some community building, stuff like that. But we try to leave as much to the market as possible.
Beautiful. That's great. Who will build the roads? I'm sure you've heard that, right?
Yeah.
And I love it that your philosophy is your residents aren't citizens; they're customers.
Correct. Yeah. As you know, when I work here, my job is never to go around and convince people that I'm doing a great job and that they should vote for me in 4 years. That's not how we operate. The way we operate is we go around and try to figure out what are the problems, what are the things we're missing, what are the regulations that are stupid, what are the things we can improve, and then we try to work with our customers to improve that.
To improve it. I'm curious, Lonis, how do you get the word out about this? I mean, obviously people like Ed and I would ultimately stumble on something like this, but how do you message this to the wider world that this option is available?
Yeah, I think we're trying to do much more of that. Currently, so far it's been a lot of just building the basics, and now we're finally at the place where we really can, start to grow. So, it's through social media, it's through talking directly with companies that have, that can't do business elsewhere, and explain to them why this is the characteristics of this zone enables them to do things here. It's also just making our current customers as happy as possible, so that they recommend us to their friends.
Yeah, so they spread the word. Well, Lonis, this is great. It's flying by. I knew it was such a fascinating topic. And folks, I'd like to remind you, if you want to contact Ed or me, send us an email to asktsoe@verasage.com. Do check out our Patreon channel where you can become a member and you can get our bonus content. And you can do that at patreon.com/TSOE. And now a word from our sponsors.
And we are back on the Soul of Enterprise with the Vice President of Growth at Prospera, Lonis Hamaili. And Lonis, I have the answer to Ron's, one of the questions is, how are you promoting this? You need a Super Bowl ad. There you go. I mean, it just... Or if you don't have a Super Bowl ad, here's what I've heard. You just say to people, well, didn't you see our ad on the Super Bowl? And everyone goes, oh, yeah. Because I don't want to say they missed it. Anyway, in all seriousness, you were talking a little bit about the local population. Let me get this straight again. So the city of Prospera is not the entire island right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so there are also some local residents who work in Prospera but are full citizens of Honduras, or are they also joint citizens with Prospera?
Both.
Okay.
There are people who work within the zone, but travel in for work, and people who live in the zone.
Okay, so how does what's the thought process for that? Would Prospera at some point just continue to grow and purchase more and more land? Is that like the long-term thinking on this?
So the goal is to unlock as much economic freedom and prosperity as possible, and so you need a minimal amount. You need some amount of land to do that.
Right.
So far, we have a big chunk of land where we can have thousands of people, but eventually we will want to buy more and to grow more.
All right. And you talked about the disputes, but has there been any situations where you've had to adjudicate something that was a crime that had to go out into Honduras?
Actually, not so far. No.
Okay. All right.
Not that I know of, at least.
Right. And I think what some people might object to is, well, you got a self-selected group of people who are wealthy and paying money to be here, so there's by definition going to be low crime. What would be your response to that?
That doesn't seem wrong. However, the fundamentals are, if you look at the fundamentals, I don't see why it would change over time either. I mean, the fundamentals is that we have, private security, which vastly outperforms public security by any measure you would look at. And so, our business model for it's to provide rule of law and security. And so security is a big part of our offering. Actually, one of the reasons why many Hondurans choose to live within the zone, it's not, maybe the regulatory aspects or even the tax benefits, because many people, may or may not pay taxes in Honduras anyway. It's actually the security of the zone. Here in the zone, they can have their families safely. The kids can go out and play. The women can go out at night. That's something that many in Honduras don't take for granted. But within the zone, because that we supply this private security, those kinds of things are much easier.
Okay. So what percentage of the island is Prospera in terms of size?
Currently a small percentage. We have around 1,000 acres, and the island is as big as the Hong Kong island. So yeah.
Okay.
Larger.
Okay. Gotcha. So the other criticism that I have seen as I was doing reading about this is certainly environmental concerns, because you have the potential problem is that, all right, you guys are going to pollute everything, and the people of Honduras are going to have to pay for it because you're creating all of this pollution inside your zone. What's the response to that?
Yeah. Well, so if you come here, you don't see much pollution. We don't have large industry here. We don't have any of that. And there are rules against externalities. We're libertarians, but we do realize that there are that there are externalities that can affect non-consenting third parties, and so there are regulations against that for sure.
Okay. You're out, obviously. You're trying to grow, Prospera, and pitching to entrepreneurs. What's the biggest pushback that you seem to be getting from people who are saying, this sounds great, but not quite ready to pull the trigger on this?
Yeah, the biggest thing is really the paradigm shift, I would say, of they are used to thinking about jurisdictions in a specific way, and we're saying we're creating something completely new from scratch, and they just have all of this confusion and maybe hesitation about how will this work in practice. Typically, the way to get over it is to come and visit for a weekend or for an event, and that's really when you get a sense of how it works on the ground. So what we try to do is, not convince them to, move over their life here, but rather to come here during an event or a weekend and, talk to startups here, talk to the community here, meet the leadership team, and basically make the decisions based on that.
And what are the things that you're doing to really just ensure that the local communities do end up benefiting from this? I mean, obviously, I think you're doing a great job with the providing jobs and all of that. But I think people might say, okay, well, that's great for right now, but what's the long-term measurement or metric for success in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I like GDP per capita quite well. I think it tracks a lot of things we value well. And, so far we're just massively increasing the GDP per capita, not only within the zone, but also around the zone. People have more money to spend on food, spend on housing, to spend on education and health for their family. And that's really the key thing, right? And so, yeah, to the extent that we keep generating more money in the pockets of people within the zone and outside of the zone, then that's the key thing. And markets are doing this automatically. Many of the companies that are set up here, they are not NGOs. They're not setting out to help the people of Honduras necessarily. They set up to solve specific customer problems and earn a profit on that. But the second order effect is that there are a bunch of companies springing up to support them in various ways. And so, yeah, that's basically our view of the market and how it will keep affecting the people here.
Okay, I imagine there's a lot of young folks like yourself, and you mentioned that you have a Montessori school. What are the grades that covers right now, or I should say the ages? You probably don't have grades, so.
Yeah. Actually, no. So we have it covers ages 3 to 18, and we have around 60 kids. So both from within the zone, but also from around the zone.
Okay, and they're the teachers that it's their permanent job to teach these kids and work with these kids.
Exactly. So many of them are, from the U.S. originally and moved down, and some of them are locals as well.
Mm-hmm. Is English seem to be the primary language? I know you wouldn't have an official language, so.
Correct. Yeah, English is the language everyone uses basically.
It uses to get around. Okay, all right. And I just love the fact that you had the conversation with Ron about the roads, because as a libertarian, I get that question all the time. Who will build the roads? I'm like, yeah, we're just going to stand here without a road screaming, I hope somebody will build a road for me. No. So the taxation, if I add it all up, is it slightly less than about 10%? Is that right?
So yes. Well, so there's on the different levels. So there's the business.
Okay.
There's 1%, and then on the personal level, you have a 5% income tax, and that's it. You have no capital gains, no inheritance tax, no wealth tax, obviously, and then there's the 2.5% VAT.
VAT. So yeah, it comes out roughly about 10%. Give or take. So all right. So that's and what is there plans for what that covers, or how is it decided how that money is spent? Obviously on roads, but other things. How do we decide that?
Yeah, well, so our goal is to at some point generate return for our shareholders, as a C corp. So, but how do we do that, right? And the way we do that is by creating as a productive and as big of a zone as possible with as much positive economic activity as possible. So what that ends up being, we have people on the ground here supporting businesses, helping them getting set up, having as much housing here as possible, having as strong of a brand as possible so that people trust to come here. And then also when you have a Prospera entity, that people trust that entity. We provide obviously the website and the tech services that allows you to start a business and run the business. So those are some of the areas, and obviously security is the big one as well. We have many dozens of security people on the ground. So those are some of the things. The one thing I would also on taxes is that not only do we have legal stability such that we can't change the tax rates on you, we also have in our constitution that we can never tax our taxation revenue can never be larger than 7.5% of the total GDP of the zone. And so that's 7.5%. It's the upper bound. We're not there yet. We're not close to it. It's the upper bound, and whereas in most countries today it's about 30-40%.
Yeah.
In our constitution that we can't change it.
There's a chant that happens on playgrounds in the United States, or at least it did, because I'm sure it doesn't. They don't talk about this anymore. But where you might say, "I'm going to come over and do something to you," and you say, "Yeah, you and what army?" So the question for you is, if someone says, "Hey, you know what? We like what's going on here in Prospera. We're coming in and taking control. So who's going to fight them off? You and what army?"
Well, so basically, the arrangement we have with Honduras is that we don't set up an army ourselves. They provide the army, and then or the security, and then in return, they get a 12% revenue share of all of the revenues that the Prospera has.
Ah, okay.
And so they provide security and also the immigration process essentially. And so those are minimal services really, but we give them 12% of all of our revenue in return.
Mm-hmm. And what's I guess to stop them from saying, you know what, this is great, we're taking this territory back over?
Yes, so this is a great question. So before we set foot here and before any investor would invest in the zone, they require legal stability, right? And so basically we wrote the legal stability agreement with Honduras that is enriched in CAFTA-DR, the trade agreement with the US, such that they can't change their laws and certainly not go into the zone, in any way. And also if they do, then, or they can't change the law, but if they do, then we have a 50-year legal stability period. And if they choose to break that contract, then we can use international institutions like the ICSID court, which is an investor state arbitration court, where we can basically go there and we can sue them in that investor state arbitration court. And if we get damages and we win, then it's enforceable in all of the countries that are signed up to this ICSID court, which is basically all the countries. So if let's say they would go in and they would then go to take a plane to the US or Sweden or Spain, then their assets would be confiscated essentially, because this arbitration award would be enforceable in all of the countries that have signed on to this arbitration court.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as with anything, it depends. You're dependent on the legal construct that you hope people stick to, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but that's true anywhere. Wow, this is just unbelievable. Ron's going to take you the rest of the way home, but I've really enjoyed this conversation, Lonis, so thank you so much for appearing today. But as I said, Ron's got another 15 minutes with you, but I want to remind our listeners that they can contact either one of us by sending an email to asktsoe@verisage.com. Again, the website is The Soul of Enterprise. Show notes, previews to upcoming shows. We'd love for you also to rate this podcast. You can do this by going to ratethispodcast.com/TSOE. But right now, a word from our sponsor, Woodard.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here with Lonis Hamaili, and he's the Vice President of Growth for Prospera in Honduras. And Lonis, I wanted to ask you about the New York Times Magazine article from August 28th, 2024. And the title is The For-Profit City That Might Come Crashing Down. I read this article. I don't know how objective she was, but she did say something at the start that I thought was interesting. She said she needed to sign an agreement of coexistence to get herself in, and that thing was 4,202 pages. Is that true?
I'm not sure what specific agreement she signed. The typical agreement of coexistence that I signed is vastly shorter than that.
Okay.
But it basically sets out the rights and obligations you have as a party to the contract. And it's part of what gives you legal stability. It's part of what, in terms of taxation, in terms of your personal rights. So it's one of the key features. But I can't speak to specifically. Maybe she got some extra pages on her documents. I'm not sure.
Is it like if I wanted to go down there just to check it out as a tourist, what would be involved in doing that?
So as a tourist, you could just get in touch with us via our website, and then we'll show you around when you come down here. And if you want to, go around without kind of by yourself, then you can sign up online, buy an e-residency, and then you can enter the zone using that e-residency.
Awesome. Now she talks about in here about there's a new president that came into Honduras that wanted to get rid of Prospera, or shut down the zone and all its privileges, and it got into Congress, it passed, but it's in legal limbo. Is kind of how she ended. What is the status of all of that?
Yeah. Well, so the history of this law is, as we spoke earlier about this, it was this Honduran economist, Octavio Sanchez and Carlos Pineda. They've conceived of this in 2009, and then Paul Romer came in as well around that time. And it passed Congress in 2013, the law, and it passed by 78%. And, you get very few things passed by any supermajority these days. But it passed by a supermajority. Even though it was passed in 2013, we didn't break ground until 2020. So there was a 7-year lag period. And the reason there was a 7-year lag period is that the SEDE law was never that popular among any president, really. This is a law that gives power to the people, right? It's very, very much decentralized power. And so this was always a grassroots project by a few economists and a few kind of business leaders. However, there's I guess a Marxist regime in power, self-described so, with things, but they haven't been able to really do much because Congress as a whole supports the SEDES. They don't want to repeal it. There is some institutions in the government that have tried to create a lot of legal uncertainty, but it hasn't affected us. We're still doing business as usual. We are protected by CAFTA-DR and also direct contracts with the government. And so, yeah, I mean, there are some fractions that tries to, undermine that, but, day to day, we haven't seen any impact. And, there's an election in 8 months. And so that will also remove some of those aspects. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is we haven't seen any change so far.
And there was something in the original law, wasn't there, about they can't mess with this for like 50 years?
Yes, yeah, we have a 50-year legal stability agreement, which, is still in effect.
Anything else you want to say about this article? Because I mean, some of it was pretty sparse and maybe not very objective. But any other retorts you had to her 4,200-word article?
Yeah, well, I can tell you one just anecdote. Is I spoke to one of the taxi drivers here, and he has a business. He drives many of the Prospera residents to their work and when they go to supermarkets and stuff like that. So he's a small local entrepreneur. He's one of the 3,000 jobs we generated, mostly indirectly, right? We don't deploy him. He works with the people here. And he said that, I don't know if it was the New York Times reporter or if it was another reporter, but he had a story where he drove back the reporter from Prospera to the airport when they were about to leave. And the reporters, they were very left-leaning, and they had already made up their mind about the bad effects for locals. And so when they left him, they said, I know this is not, my thing today, but I just want to say I'm so sorry for everything that's happening to you. by this Prospera people. I'm so sorry for this, whatever. And he was so confused about this because, he's this 100% of his income is derived from people living in the zone. And so this was just this very stark contrast between the journalist who kind of just thought about everything in abstract terms, who was talking down to this entrepreneur who could feed his family through this, through the people and businesses that I've set up in the zone. And I think, I'm not sure if it was this journalist or if it was some other journalist, but that's just, I guess, speaks to a bit how they are thinking about these topics.
Well, she wrote about, like Prospera was going in and just taking over other people's land. And it's obvious that you guys have a clause that you have to pay fair market value, and you just can't go in and confiscate somebody's land.
We can't even do eminent domain. We don't have any, we can't do any amount of expropriation. I mean, the state can, the Honduras state can, but our small zone certainly don't have those legal privileges. So it's in our charter as well. We can't do that. So all the land we've had, not only do we pay market price, we pay typically above market price because we have to negotiate with people who knows that we have money, and so they like to take a profit, and we're happy to pay for that. And all of the land we've bought so far, except that are not the resort area, have been mostly uninhabited forest.
Because you don't have to be contiguous, do you? You can hop around and expand that way.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, fascinating. You mentioned fintech, crypto, bio. What other industries do you see coming in or maybe getting foreign direct investment and you see as growth areas?
So, there's a drone company here that does drone delivery of food and supplies. We have a circular factory, it's called, which is a robotics-enabled manufacturing plant, which is one of the most advanced in the certainly in the region. And we have also some companies experimenting with stuff in energy and stuff like that. And then we also have digital nomads who just wants a great community to live in, a reasonable taxation, and security and stuff like that.
What do you do for your energy? Where do you get it?
Well, I like to read Hayek, I guess, and Mises. I think that's always good for energy. I mean, it's.
I meant your energy for the island, for the residents. Electricity and things like that. You have a.
Right, yeah. Not the personal energy. Yeah, so the energy on the island. Yeah, there's an energy grid here. We pay for. We pay to use. Energy is relatively expensive, so there are some entrepreneurs here that are working on solar energy and other energy sources.
What's your personal goal for Prospera in the next 5 or 10 years? What would you like to see?
Certainly in 5 to 10 years, I would like to see us have tens of thousands of people in the zone and generate hundreds of thousands of jobs. Hopefully in my lifetime, we will see something like a new Hong Kong or a new Singapore, at least the early innings of it. I think this will be the new paradigm. Just as the rule of law and the separation of power was a novel concept 300 years ago. People didn't understand why should we have a separation of power? Why should we have some form of democracy and some form of republic? I think currently we are in the early innings of this new paradigm, which is a for-profit governance paradigm. And so I'm very excited to be part of that.
That's awesome. Well, Lonis, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. Wish you all the best, and maybe you'll come back and share updates with us as this goes forward. We'd love to hear how this is going, and maybe someday we'll do a show live from Prospera.
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you very much. Hang with us as we do a live close. Ed, what do we have up next week?
Next week, Ron, we are going to be talking to Ethan Williams, who is a fractional chief pricing officer.
Awesome. I will see you in 167 hours.
This has been The Soul of Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy, sponsored by Woodard, building your ideal practice with coaching, education, community, and resources. Join us next week at 3 p.m. Eastern, that's noon Pacific. In the meantime, listen to us at www.thesoulofenterprise.com. prospera.com.